This is Change Champions with Trish, Thurley and Charlene Thompson, a show about leading and surviving change. Hey Trish.
Hey Charlene, how are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. You?
Yeah, great, thanks.
Good. So what's the topic for today?
I've been rereading The Fearless Organization by Amy Edmondson, which is a great book. And one of her hypotheses, in fact, a lot of her research has proven it, is that psychological safety is a catalyst for other interventions to work best. So, she hypothesized that you can have a really talented team, you can have a really diverse team, but without psychological safety in the culture, they won't perform. And so I just wanted to get your views on this from your own working experience.
I agree. I do think it's definitely a catalyst. I'm not sure if it's the core of lots of things, but because I have trust in my head. But the reason why I think it's such a big deal is because if you don't feel safe in any environment, you can't be yourself. And so we're forever asking people to be their true selves at work. And then the next question is, well, what does that mean? And it's comfortability. It's knowing that you're in a place where you feel like you belong, you have a space there, there's space there for you. And if you don't have that, if you feel uncomfortable, how likely are you to speak up, ask questions, share your opinion, share your creative idea if you don't feel safe? And I think that the reason why sometimes people might look at the term psychological safety and think it's all just a bit wishy-washy is because the term safe, when you think safe, you think of your home, you think of a bank, even you think of like a vault, and they don't realize that safety is quite literally being comfortable, not feeling that you're going to be attacked in any way, shape or form. That kind of safe. Do you see what I mean?
That's really interesting that you raised that thing about the trust or psychological safety, because I thought she summarizes it quite nicely to say that trust is between two people. Like we trust each other because we've known each other for so many years, we've had a close working relationship. So trust is always one-on-one. Psychological safety is an atmosphere in a team, group, a place, which says, I can say what's on my mind. So candor is really, really important. I can just, if I think something, I can say it. Of course, you can't be, offensive, or you have to learn how to give and receive criticism in a constructive way. They are all skills that are needed. But the fact that you can just say, actually, I don't agree with that, or it's funny you should say that, I think the complete opposite, and that you could actually say that. And that's what she's sort of talking about. And I think that, having that ability or comfort to know that you're not taking a risk, that you're going to get your ears ripped off, or you're going to get somehow a mark against you in some way by actually being candid or constructively disagreeing with somebody.
Well, do you know what? You've just raised a good point, the whole having a mark against you. So what was coming to my head was what stops us from feeling comfortable in the first place? Separate from, is your manager creating that environment, but what stops you from automatically feeling comfortable? I mean, yes, obviously it's the atmosphere, but that whole mark against you thing, I'm thinking back to school, right? And, generally people in this country anyway have gone through very similar schooling styles. It wasn't a psychologically safe atmosphere. If you put your hand up to answer a question and it was even remotely wrong, you'd be ridiculed like nobody's business, and sometimes from the teachers.
So, and ridicule and humiliation has been shown to be one of the most powerful human emotions. We can all remember a time when you felt humiliated and belittled, and it's just It's a terrible feeling. And you hold that with you. Even if you've moved out of that space, you're no longer at school, or you no longer work for the employer who made you feel like that. You bring it with you to the new workplace until somebody can reassure you that it's actually okay to say these things. Or
yes, and I know of an example recently of a lady who she had a hard time in her last workplace, and has gone straight into a new job in a much better atmosphere, much more psychologically safe in general. But because she still has old wiring, she's finding it really hard to adjust. And that's the thing, that feeling of safety. And yes, it's important for a manager or leaders to be able to create that kind of atmosphere, that culture at work. But also, I think a lot of all of the things that we speak about, trust, safety, burnout, all of, just looking at things differently and paradigm shifting, I think a lot of it comes, one of the catalysts is that you need to look at yourself. You need to see where you're coming from, and is there, because things can happen to you, and obviously it's your response that determines your character and things like that, but things can happen to you and you can have residual trauma as a result of it, which therefore blinds you to things in the future that may be good. Because you've still got this old wiring about, well, if I say this, then they're just going to ridicule me, and they're looking at you with loving, smiling faces, and you
I like that phrase, residual trauma. That's a nice one. You've got coming out with some great phrases. And there was some research that, because I've been looking into this in terms of what stops people learning. And one of the things is, if they've been frightened, recently, their ability to learn is impaired. And the research study on this was done. Do you remember the old sort of Pavlov's dogs? And them learning a kind of response. Everybody heard about Pavlov's dogs when they were at school. But they were involved, the laboratory was involved in a really bad flood where the dogs, quite a lot of the dogs almost died, and they were rescued with just their poor little noses above, the water level. And what they found out for the weeks afterwards, for several weeks afterwards, their ability to learn was heavily impaired. So there's been some kind of brain chemistry change, which means that when your amygdala in your brain comes under this deep stress from fear, your learning is impaired for quite some time afterwards. So I thought there's some great science behind that.
That is fascinating, and I can't say I'm surprised at all. Of course it would. It's just, you can only do so many things at any given point in time. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me, and you see it over and over again. And it's just, people have beliefs, and the beliefs are so strong, and they come from fact, they come from their own lived experiences. And because our brains will do everything in its power to try and protect ourselves, plus also it doesn't like to change. Just naturally, it likes to use the least amount of power as physically possible to do anything. It's, well, why learn this new thing when you've already been told, if you say this, bad things are going to happen, so just don't. Just presume everybody's like that.
The other thing that comes out of the research I thought was fascinating as well is that the immediate reward for silence, as in not getting your ears ripped off, not getting humiliated, so that reward comes in instantaneously. But the reward for speaking up or disagreeing or putting an idea forward, the reward for that may be some way in the future, and it may or may not materialize. So your brain's weighing up, like the least risky thing is silence. So more often than not, people will go for silence. And one of the things they said that, as a team member, as a leader, one of the things you can personally do to encourage people is, when somebody does speak up, even if you do think their question isn't founded or their idea isn't good, you can turn around and say, thanks for speaking up, Charlene. That's, I really value your input. In this situation, I'm not going to go with your idea or suggestion or whatever because of X, Y, Z. So the person you're disagreeing with or giving an idea to may have greater experience and knowledge, but the fact that they've thanked you for speaking up shows everybody else that that's welcome. So that was one of the first things that they said, that you should do is just, say, thanks for your question or thanks for your idea. And I thought that was quite simple.
Definitely. And then it comes to leadership as well, because, and you know how I feel about this, but a leader being genuine. So you're saying just right there, saying thank you. Question for leaders. Are you actually thankful when people speak up in meetings, or would you prefer them to be silent? In your actual heart, would you prefer them to just take your orders and just go off and do the work? Or do you actually want to hear them? Do you care about their opinion? And the reason why I say that is because I think in some people's hearts of hearts, they don't actually want to know what other people think, but they're reading all the books and they're listening to the podcast and they're watching the shows and going, yes, I should ask for my team member's opinion. Tick, I've asked, but they don't actually care. And I'll tell you what, your direct reports, your colleagues will know that you don't actually care. You might say all of the right things. You might even say thank you afterwards, but people know, you can feel it when somebody doesn't actually give two figs about what you've just said, and they're not going to take it on board, even if what you've said is actually really, really helpful, or even if it's not, but you would have preferred that clarification as you've just said. And this is why I think people should actually just sit down and be really honest with themselves and say, okay, if I don't actually want somebody else's opinion, why is that? Why is that? If this is a thing where I'm not actually open to any opinion because we have to just carry this thing out because that happens sometimes. Okay, but then say so. Don't then say, yes, so this is going to be a creative session where we're going to figure out how to deal with this. And it's already been decided. That's not the time to try to build psychological safety, because you know what? You can build psychological safety and you can tear it down as well. It's a moving, living atmosphere. You don't just, because you've had a good relationship with people, that's how it will stay forevermore. You have to keep building it.
Yeah. And what they've shown is that those teams that have to operate under really, really stressful conditions, if you imagine in a hospital A&E department, or in military settings and that sort of thing, that you have to create an atmosphere where people don't have time for all the niceties, but can be candid and short. So once you've built this atmosphere, that people can do this kind of shorthand talking to each other. So it can just be something like, you suggest an idea and I say, no, doing this. Or somebody comes in and says, I'm giving this drug, and somebody else says, and don't forget X. So that you don't have to do all the nicey, teamy things to make that work. Yeah. But you have to get to a level of sort of team-based trust, which is what psychological safety is, so that people can shorthand without offending the other person. But there are times where they don't want suggestions, but more often than not, if they're behaving like that on an ongoing basis, it's either arrogance or defensiveness, either of which can harm, the leadership of a team.
Yes. And I'd like to go into that deeper in another thing. I think a lot of things come down to defensiveness, but what you've reminded me of is our old fan favorite, 6 thinking hats. And the reason why I say that is because for anybody who doesn't know, 6 hats is something that was created by Dr. Edward de Bono, rest in peace. And it's a methodology for how to run meetings effectively. So focusing everybody's mind on one thing at the same time. So we're thinking about the possible downsides to something, and that would be black hat. The upsides to something, and that would be the yellow hat. Green hat would be creative ideas for problem solving. And I'm mentioning this because in our working environment, we used 6 hats so much, it became a language. It became the shorthand for, okay, so we've got this thing and we're hashing out in a meeting, and then you can just say, but yellow hat, da, 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 da. And you didn't have to explain, or red hat, which means your emotion, your gut feel about something. And you could just say red hat, XYZ. And because we all had that language, everybody understood where we were coming from. And it was very difficult to take offense to something when you prefaced it with, like, this is just an idea. But you didn't have to say it's just an idea. You didn't have to have that tone in your voice that makes you feel a little bit weak. Like as if you're speaking from the shadows, you could just say green hat. How about this? And creating psychological safety, being able to create that language that everybody understands and everybody knows how to speak. You know, it goes back to our innermost tribal humanity. It's just, this is us.
I really agree with you when it comes to the hats. It's a great methodology. And, you know, like white hat being just data. Yeah. If you preface it, say, you know, sales are down, bit of white hat for you, sort of thing, then people don't take that as a criticism.
Yes.
The same way. It's just data. And so I agree with you, to create that common language does give people a shorthand way of speaking. But obviously, if you're new into a team, you won't have that. And so you've got to work to create that a little bit. And so it does take a little bit of kind of setting up. You've got to be determined to do this and think, right, how can we foster this level of security that people can show up as themselves and can speak out candidly and can take and give constructive criticism, because that is incredibly difficult. I don't know about you, but I've never really liked being criticized. Who does?
No, can't stand it. You know, I do take it on board and I do learn, but it's very, very hard. And what you were just saying there, building psychological safety, for me, a lot of it is about onboarding, whether it's en masse or whether it's your specific team. Do you have any plans in place to onboard new members of staff? Like all of the 50,000 acronyms that we happen to have in whatever workplace. Is there a list to say what these things are? Is there a timetable of a general routine of when things happen in the company? Being able to give people these just foundational, skeletal bone things of this is just how we do things. And then the extra feel comes later. I think that helps a lot, because you feel like you've just walked into a room and everybody's been having this ongoing conversation and having to catch up. We all know what that feels like. It's difficult, it's hard, it makes you feel a bit small, particularly if you're introverted. If you're extroverted, it's a bit different, because at least you can come in with the personality and be all big and bubbly, but it's not the same for more introverted folks, you know, so give them something.
Yeah, interestingly, that really came home to roost for me when I was working with Colgate Palmolive. They were such a lovely company, but I took maternity leave to have my first son, and then came back in to the workplace. And so it was like I'd had, however, I probably had about 3 months off, and came back, and it felt like a newbie coming in, but knowing how it had been. And I thought to myself, oh my God, they all talk in acronyms all the time. They shorthand, everybody knows stuff, and suddenly I don't know it. And I felt very overwhelmed, and I felt that, you know, sort of there was a huge amount that had to be re-explained. And I thought, this just reminded me of being that newbie, and how nobody, you know, so they kind of went out of their way to give certain things, you know, like this is the policy on this is procedure on that, that's where you get your coffee from, sort of thing. But some of those you know, team-based language stuff, for somebody to kind of, I suppose, be looking out for you in the early days would be great, wouldn't it?
Yeah, so having a buddy to, like, having that kind of buddy system to reintegrate or integrate people back into your environment, I think is invaluable, because I've been a buddy. Have I ever had one? I'm not sure if I've ever had one, but I've been a buddy several times, and I know it's made a difference, because it's again, it's about trust. So it's just having somebody you can trust to just give you the real skinny. Oh, okay. So this is the background to this project, which is the reason why people might be feeling a little bit testy, but it's okay. Just take it all in. Whereas, you know, you don't want to go walk into something and think that if you said something, you've just said the wrong thing. And because we've all got lots of emotions going on in our head. And this is the reason why psychological safety is so important.
It's like when you say something and everybody looks down at their feet, or they look at the floor, they look at anywhere, you know, and you think you know something's wrong, you've said the wrong thing, but you don't know why or how or the context of it. And quite often people are too, well, they call it politeness, but they're too embarrassed, or maybe even they don't care enough to actually explain. So having that buddy is really great. I've had a formal mentor, which has really, really helped, especially navigating the hierarchical politics. You know, that's been really fantastic. But I think I've rarely had somebody who was formally assigned as a buddy.
Yeah.
Informally, I've tried to do it for people, and people have tried to do it for me, but it hasn't been necessarily recognized that you need a kind of buddy.
I think that would also, in closing, be really helpful in the environment that we're in now, where we are so much more in the virtual world than in the physical world. That's one way to integrate people, is make sure everybody has a buddy, and for a long time, not for a week or two, for 3 months, you know. And I think that would help a lot. So to be continued. That's simple things. In summary, just try to look at yourself to see where you feel safe, and try to create that environment for others. I think. What would you think as a closing?
Yeah, I think certainly self-analysis, being able to think, you know, like, do I really want to hear people's ideas? Do I really want to hear their suggestions or their criticisms, whatever? Examining yourself, making sure you're not being uber arrogant or defensive, that sort of thing, those things that you said. But also thinking about, how can I create that safety for others? How can I be a buddy? How can I make somebody feel that what they said or did was welcome, even if it wasn't right, even if it, you know, was an idea that we've tried before, and everybody knows we tried it before. That person, if they're especially new, they don't know that you've tried that before.
Yeah, it's inclusivity, make people feel welcome.
And I think the other thing, just going back to that, you know, when you've had a terrible treatment before, like it might be school, it might be previous employer, to know that people come in have that you know, sort of trauma from a previous bad experience that has to be overcome, so they're not immediately gonna show.
That's why it's so much more important, because you're not getting somebody just fresh off the bat. No one is fresh off the bat. Everybody has their own experiences. It's why you're hiring them. But that comes with good things and bad things. So the better that you integrate someone into how you do things, whilst also giving them the freedom to bring their own personal expertise and their opinions when asked to the table, the easier we can create psychological safety in the workplace.
Fantastic.
Thank you. For next time. This was Change. Thank you.